Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Erbekees experience. I am Jody Irby, owner of Erbekees-Keeshonden, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Melanie Strong.
Hi, everybody. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, on YouTube at the Erbekees-Keeshonden channel. You can find links to all social media to include this podcast on Jody's website, which is www.erbekees.com.
Thank you. So today we're just doing story time. Hopefully this is going to be a little bit, there'll be some education. We're going to kind of tie in a couple things, but most of it's just going to be funny things and not so funny things. We both of us have been through. I know Melanie's creeping up on for half a year, but creeping up on a year. She's had a couple experiences herself. Thought I'd kind of share some of the reasons why I do what I do. And a lot of people will look at my information and like I have everything mapped out, like week 1, week 2, what I expect, when to do this, when to do that. And a lot of people are really put off by that. They're like, whoa, you've got a lot of this and that. And I don't really call it rules. It's more of just, a process. This is how I do it. And pretty much for everything I have in there, I've had at least 20 people make that a thing. It's like when my payments are due, when you pick up, when you schedule, it's like, sometimes it's pulling teeth to get people to coordinate and things like that. So, I kind of want to tie some of these stories in to as to why I do what I do. And one of the big things is for those of you who maybe are new to Urban Keys and stuff, maybe just checking out my website, thinking about a puppy and that kind of thing. One of the newer things I started, I wanna say it's been over a year, but I stopped doing kennel tours. I have closed my doors, and I don't let people in my house. I don't let people in my kennels. This was a really tough decision for me because I'm pretty, I wasn't born and raised in the South, but I consider myself pretty Southern as far as hospitality and letting people come in and all that stuff. So it was a really tough decision for me because I always want people to come in and see the dogs and the puppies and my areas and things like that. But anymore in today's world, it's just been proven over and over and over and over and over and over that that's just not a good thing anymore. It's
Yeah.
just,
What was the final straw that
oh,
made you
we're
decide
gonna
that?
start off with a bang, literally. And I joke about this now. I joke about it, but when this happened, it was, pretty much I wouldn't say terrifying, but it was pretty scary. So I had this client that purchased a puppy. And of course, he got on the litter very early. So he had all the information, what weeks to schedule pickup and this and that. This man was from the East Coast, so he had to fly here and come pick up the puppy. And, I usually ask by week 6 that everybody's making their plan so I can put you on my schedule, make sure I don't have doctor's appointments or other things that are going to take me away from the house so I can, be here when you get here. So week 6 came and went, nothing. Week 7, I sent him an email and I'm like, hey, you're picking up next week. I kind of need to know. My schedule's pretty full. And he just kind of kept jerking me around and, it's like, oh, I'll get to that soon. I'm working on it. And, it ended up literally being Monday and pickup was starting that Thursday. Of course it ran Thursday to Thursday. So he still had technically another week. But I'm like, man, I need to know. You need to tell me. And again, kept just kind of digging me around and wouldn't commit to a pickup time. And I knew he had to fly, so why are you waiting this
Mhm.
close to schedule that? Because it's gonna cost you a fortune. But, anyway, needless to say, the day before he schedules with me. He's like, "I'm gonna come tomorrow. I land at so and so, 9 o'clock, like in Nashville. I'm gonna pick up around between 11 and 12." And I was like, "Great." So that's that. So the next morning, of course, I have my process. I get the puppies a bath, I get them all ready. When somebody schedules 11 to 12, 10:30, I'm sitting out front waiting. I always give a 30-minute either way. And coincidentally, I had one of my clients that, we've been friends. She has two of my puppies, and I think the dogs are going on 10 years old. So we stay in contact and we'll have these long phone calls every, 4, 5, 6 months. And that morning was one of those conversations. So I just went out there and we're out there just yakking and yakking and yakking. And she knew in conversation that I had somebody coming at 11. And so, yeah, 11 o'clock comes and goes and we're just yakking. And, we turn around, it's 12 o'clock. And she's like, where's your client still hasn't shown up? And I'm like, no, this happens all the time. It's so frustrating, I just so happened at that point was just sitting around doing nothing and talking, but still, it's the fact. If you schedule a time, I kind of expect you to be there.
Mhm.
So anyway, we're hour and a half into this conversation. Now it's 12:30 and I get a beep on my phone and I got a message from him. And again, he's on the East Coast. He was going to be landing in Nashville at 9 a.m. So he was had to have been at the airport early. It was a direct flight, but still, you got to get there early, check in, all that other stuff. 12:30, he sending me a message and he was like, "My flight got bumped this morning. I'm not gonna be there today." And I'm like, and again, leading up to this, it was like pulling teeth trying to get this guy. So I was always already irritated about that he has no consideration of my time. And I just kind of went off and I'm like, "So you waited all day to tell me this? You couldn't have sent me a one-line text, 'Hey, my flight was booked. I can't make it today.' You couldn't have done that 6 hours ago, 8 hours ago?" I'm like, "That is just, that's crappy." I said, and I told him, I said, "You've been jerking me around for a week and a half now. I'm done. I'm done. I'm gonna mail you your refund. You will get a full refund. I'm not." And I even said, "I don't care what you do, but I'm not selling you a puppy." And so, of course, there were several emails back and forth, begging me to change my mind and all this stuff. And I'm like, "No, I'm just not. So we're done." And I just blocked everything, blocked his phone, blocked his emails and everything. And that was that for me. So the next morning, I'm sitting at the computer and my doorbell rings and I'm thinking, okay, well, and I walked over because typically when the FedEx guy brings my Chewy boxes, as usual, he put it right in front of my stairs. So I just kind of looked over out the front window and I saw the Chewy boxes and I just assumed it was the FedEx guy walking away. And I went back to the computer and was doing my computer work. And then the doorbell rings again, second time, and I thought, "Okay, well, maybe he needs me to sign or something." So I go back and look, and there was a man walking away and a car that I didn't recognize. And I was like, "Well, that's weird." And it dawned on me because he kind of turns somewhat sideways. And I recognized because, I got a copy of people's driver's license as part of my contract. And I recognized the face and I was like, "Oh my God, it's that guy." And I had puppies out in the kennel, which is at the side of my house. And there's directly next to that kennel, there's a gate that blocks people from coming in. And on that gate, there's a big keep out sign. And I'm going out there to make sure my puppies are okay. And this guy is literally walking around the back of my house. This isn't in the front.
Mhm.
This is on, the back of my house. And the way my kennels are, I have that shade fabric on the far side. So if you're coming up the road, you can't see in my kennels.
Mm.
But I was out there fixing to get my puppies and bring them in because I didn't know what was going to happen. And see him walk in, and he's walking over to my gate and he's putting his hands on the gate to open it. And I just started screaming at him. I'm like, "I don't know who, get off my property." And of course he's like, "Oh, Jody, is that you?" He's trying to be all nice and all this stuff. And I'm like, "You need to get off my property." And I wasn't even 100% sure at this time if it was really him. I just assumed it was, because I don't know. I just had a feeling. But so he keeps going and opening the gate, and I'm still screaming all kinds of profanity at him. I said, "You have about 5 seconds and I'm gonna get a gun." and you need to be off my property. And he's still trying to, calling me by name and stuff. And I just ran in the house and, we're in the South. We have guns
Mhm.
and they're loaded and they're handy. And I laugh now because it was turkey season and I'm an avid hunter and I had my shotgun just sitting here because I was actually going turkey hunting that afternoon, so I grab it and I'm running out there and loading it as I'm walking out there. And sure enough, I get the glimpse of him. He did not come in. He did not come in that gate. He was going around back to the front. So I came back in the house and was going out to my front door because I figured next thing he's going to do is come to the front door again. So I'm out on the front with my shotgun and, he had gotten in his car and he listened, he got off my property, but he went and sat in the front yard. And I'm just standing out there. And, at this point, I'm like 99.9% sure it's that guy. And, to this day, he was coming in that gate. If I wasn't back there,
Mhm.
he would have come in and took a puppy. I guarantee you that was his intention. I mean, why else would you walk to the back of somebody's house and go
Mhm.
even think about going in a gate that says keep out? I mean, in my mind, he was coming to get that puppy no matter what. He was just going to take one. And you can hear the puppies, when you pull up, mama's bark, the puppies bark. So he knew the puppies were back there. But it was just this whole big thing. And it was kind of funny because I could see him from my front window here in the dining room. And I came in the house and got my phone and called the police. And it was kind of funny because again, we're in southern middle Tennessee. I'm calling the police. I didn't call 911. I just called, the
Mhm.
regular police number. And I started to tell her what was going on. She's like, "Oh, you must be Miss Jody." I crack up now thinking about that, but, at the time, I'm like, "Yes?" I mean, I'm dumbfounded, I'm shaking, I'm like, I mean, to be put in that kind of a situation, because again, I'm gonna protect myself, I'm gonna protect my puppies, and I think for me, the biggest thing was I kinda even now, I kinda have, like, PTSD over this because I I woulda shot him if he woulda come in that gate, if he woulda kept coming, what else do you do? I mean, I'm not
Mhm.
just gonna lay there and roll over and let him do what I don't know if he had a weapon, I don't know, anything.
So had he called?
Oh, yeah. So he called the police. He's sitting in front of my yard on the road, and he had called the police. So that's how they knew, I guess when I was telling her what was going on, she just put the stories together and knew that was him and this is me. And, we're talking to both people. And I'm like, oh, I was like, you need to get somebody out here quick. And I made a point to tell her that, I did arm myself because I didn't know. I didn't want him to come shooting at me, like, I'm not gonna go stand out, I'm gonna keep my rifle, my shotgun until somebody shows up because I don't know what he's gonna do. A couple minutes, it was about 5 minutes and he left, it was probably another 20 minutes and the police officer came. She had already stopped and talked to him. And, his big thing was he made all these, arrangements to come all the way over here. And I'm like, I told him yesterday I was done. I told him yesterday there was no puppy and that I would refund
And
him.
here's my email and here's my receipts.
Exactly. And then she said, "Well, he wants his money." I said, and the time it took, once he left, I went and grabbed a copy of our contract. I ran it through and got a copy for the police, and I wrote out a check for a full refund, and I attached it to the contract. And when she came, I was like, "This is our agreement. It says right on there, I have the right to refuse the sale of puppy to anybody." I said, "Here is this full refund. You can see my check matches the amount of the contract." And so she left, and then she comes back like 5 minutes later, and I guess he wouldn't accept my check. He didn't want my check because he didn't think it was good. Like, and this is like, I think at the time I was probably at $2,000 or whatever. It's a felony. You can't just write hot checks. I'm
Mhm.
like, well, that's stupid, but whatever.
Yeah, I handed a hot check to a police officer to hand over to
Right?
you.
It's like, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So, and then she was like, well, you know, just keep everything calm and, just get a cashier's check. And, I ended up, of course, immediately contacted my attorney and went through the whole thing with him. I just said, here, do this, do whatever attorneys do and make this go
Right.
away. Here's the money, here's that. And, I wanted, to protect myself. So we did that. But yeah, it's like, just it makes you wonder, like, I mean, I don't know what his intent was. I don't know what, and that was one day where I was alone. Typically, there's somebody here. You're here, Josh is here. But even with that, you're out there cleaning. You're not going to know. I
Yeah.
mean, what are the chances? You don't even have a cell signal half the
Yeah,
time.
I don't. I have to literally come out the door
Yeah.
to get
Like
the
I
signal.
couldn't call anybody. So yeah. So that was the final. I'm done. It's like the mentality of a lot of people in today's world is, you hear it all the time, entitlement, entitlement, entitlement. He thought because he paid for a puppy, he could just walk on my property and come take one. Yeah, no, that's not how that works here, buddy. And it's like, and I even go back and forth. I always anymore. And I've thought about just carrying when people come anymore, just openly holstering a pistol just to protect myself because, a lot of times I'm collecting cash. It's like, it's just really an awkward situation. I don't really, you know, and you really don't think about those things until you're faced with something. We've had a lot of situations with money over the years, but, when you're here at the house, I don't really think about it because you feel safe in your home. You think this is my safe place, and then something like that happens, and it's like, and then, that spirals into every inch of my property's under surveillance. We've got cameras, I've got guns everywhere. It's like, and it's, I'm locking all my gates literally with padlocks now to slow people down. Sure, they can still climb the fence or whatever, but, there's so many things that one event changed because, it made me not feel safe in my home,
Yeah.
and that's
I feel like climbing in is one thing, but climbing out with a puppy is a
it would
whole
it
nother.
would take a lot of guts to do something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't but I mean, just for the average person to walk up to a gate that says "keep out" and start walking
And
through it, I mean, I personally would never even think about I wouldn't walk
I
behind
wouldn't go
somebody's
past the,
house.
yeah.
Who would even think of doing that? But I mean, he was just strutting in like he was coming for his puppy, and it's like, it was like, yeah, that's not happening, buddy. And it was funny because, when the police officer came the last time, and maybe, it was a female police officer, and I was like, I don't know what the laws are here. And so, yeah, I don't know if, I don't know what I can and cannot do, but I do know I'm going to protect my puppies to the very end, no matter what that is, and myself, So, and she was like,
Which you have the right to do.
absolutely. That's what she was like. I can't tell you to shoot somebody, but I'm going to tell you to protect yourself. So whatever you need to do that. So yeah, that was my absolute final straw where I was like, I'm just, I'm shutting it down. I'm done with this. People just have no respect for myself and my property and my puppies and my dogs. And, people are it's just weird anymore. It's just really weird with people. Back in the day, when I started doing this 20 some odd years ago, it was so different. It was like, it never even crossed my mind. You brought people in your home, you brought them, you showed them everything, and that was just kind of how you did it. And I realized, it's kind of really bad because, that's one of the big red flags with your breeder. If you don't show them where the puppies are and you don't do this and you don't do that. And I'm like, now I don't do any of that. Of course, now, I'm doing all the video. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the same thing. But, so many people want to come and pick out their puppies. They want to come in person, and that'll just spiral me off on, how many times have I had the people come in, and especially in the beginning, because in the beginning, I was 20 years younger, so that has a lot to do with just my own maturity. I didn't want to be a jerk. I didn't want to, kick people out. I didn't want to be that way. And, things happen so few and far between, I just thought, well, whatever. But, back in the day when I would let people come in, I had this one lady, this couple, young couple, they had a little boy. He was probably two and a half, somewhere between 2 and 3. And they didn't believe in vaccinating. They didn't vaccinate their child. They weren't putting them, they were going to homeschool. They were going to, I had their whole life history. They didn't want to vaccinate the dog. I was really on the fence of even selling them a puppy. And, we were in the very early stages of, talking, and they came to the house and wanted to see the puppies. And I let him in, I bring him down. And, if, from the get go, you could tell the child had never been told no. He had never been disciplined. They were of that new, 100% positive child rearing, which, whatever. So we go downstairs, and of course, I used those pools. I had all the puppies in a pool. And, at first they were, just kind of looking. The puppies were young. They were like a week, 2 weeks old, maybe. Not even. And the mother put the little boy in the pool with the puppies, and I was like, "Oh, shit, this isn't gonna go well." I'm like, I don't wanna be a jerk. I'm just gonna, if everything goes okay, we're gonna be good." So, the kid's petting the puppies, and she's all, "Oh, be gentle, be gentle." And of course, it's a little boy, he's not being gentle, and I'm just cringing. I'm like, "What do I do?" I'm kinda like, and this is in the very beginning, yeah, I was just kinda like, "I don't know what to do here." I've never been faced with this. It's like, do I just jerk the kid out of there? All this stuff is
Right.
going through my mind. And the kid has a puppy in his hands, and he stands up, and the mom's like trying to negotiate the child to sit back down with this puppy. He kind of puts it holds the puppy towards his chest, and the puppy crawled over and fell on the floor, landed on its head, and just screamed and screamed and screamed. And of course, at this point, the kid's mad because he's not getting his way, and he's stomping his feet, and he's throwing a fit. And of course, mom and dad are just sitting there like calmly trying to get their child, and I'm screaming in my mind. It's like, I just wanna yank this kid up and throw them all out, but I'm like,
I would have.
I should've. Hindsight,
Yeah.
I have after the fact years ago, but this was in the very beginning. I was 20 years younger, and it was like, and it comes I'm gonna kinda skip ahead real quick, but I can't prove it because at that point, I don't do collars on the puppies till they're older.
Mhm.
But that puppy in that litter, I sold a brother and his sister, and this puppy that he dropped on its head was a male. I sold, siblings together to a couple, and by the time their puppy was 1 year old, it was having seizures, like cluster. And, I can't prove any of this, but in my mind, when he dropped that puppy on the floor, I guarantee you, I've talked to vets about this situation because it haunts me to this day. It's like the puppy's little brain probably swole. It probably caused all
Mhm.
kinds of issues, that you couldn't see, but it was going on. And and again, so that was probably one of my first bad experiences in my home. And then, this kid's still going on and on. They finally get him to sit in the pool, and he's thrashing his feet around and hitting the puppies. And it's like, and again, to this day, even now, I'm just like, I was so mad. And it was like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the courage to just be a bitch and say, "Get the hell out of my house and take your damn kid with you," because
Mhm.
he was just a brat. I mean, no discipline whatsoever. And of course, they're like, "Oh, well, if there's anything wrong with the puppy, we'll pay for it." And then, of course, they were those types of parents. It was like, tomorrow I'm not going to know which puppy it is, because they're all newborn and this and that. But yeah, I mean, and then they had the nerve like, the next day, they wanted to come back, and I'm like and of course, at this point, and I did, I was like, "I'm done with you. No, I'm not doing
Okay.
we're not do" no, they never got a puppy. I wish I would have marked that puppy and made them take that puppy, going back, of course, you think of all this stuff after the fact, but yeah, no, I absolutely did not sell them a puppy, and I was just livid about the whole situation, and they were just like, you know I think even if they're sitting there listening to it, Elizabeth, they probably never thought they did anything wrong. They probably didn't see anything wrong with that whole situation. I mean, they just thought their child was perfect, and he could never do no wrong. And I hate to talk negatively of children because it's not the child's fault. He obviously had no discipline. He had, and he was only 2, 3 years old. So there's that. We've all had the toddler age. That's
Right.
just maybe he just needed a nap or whatever.
Maybe we as parents don't put him in a pool of newborn
Right?
puppies.
Or at least
Yeah.
ask or,
Yeah.
they just plop and, and it was like, yeah, so that was just a nightmare. And it's like, I think, most of my bad experiences in my home are similar to that. It's parents who just think their children I've had people come, I had one I was in Petersburg at the time on the ranch, and my setup, all the dogs were in one room in the house, and then you go in the backyard. And then in the backyard, I did have some kennels, like chain link kennels set up on platforms. When I had girls in heat or males or whatever, I could separate dogs if I needed to. So I had like 4 kennels. So I had some of the dogs separated because I did at that point, I had girls in heat and different things going on, and they showed up to pick out their puppy. And the puppies were older, and they had 4 children. And of course, you're in there and you're talking to the parents, and they have a million questions, which is awesome. I love that. We're sitting there talking, and I'm never distracted. I'm always watching their kids and seeing what they're doing. The parents are oblivious to what their kids are doing. They're coming in, out, inside, outside, outside in the kennel, outside in the other kennel, outside in another kennel. The other kennel's open, the dog's out, they're inside, and I'm watching all this through the window, and I'm like, again, screaming on the inside thinking, why do I do this? Why do I even let these people in my house? And it was so funny because that was like, because there was 4 of them, and they were all younger. They were probably from ages, 5 to 12. It was just one of those things. There was so much going on and so much commotion, and, like, and the parents were just oblivious. Not once was it, "Don't go outside, don't open those kennels out." It was never anything like that. It never even crossed their mind. And it's so funny because the next day, and I probably shouldn't say this, because whoever it was is gonna know exactly, but they sent me a thank you, which was beautiful. And they said that their children had the best day ever out on the ranch with the dogs and everything, which I'm sure they did. I was it, but for me, it was such chaos. And, like, they're stepping on puppies. They actually let girls out that were in heat that shouldn't have been in the yard. I mean, there were several layers going on there, but, and they were nice enough to thank me. And I'm like, and I just didn't even, acknowledge, at that point. That was that point when I was at Big B is where I started turning. I started to be like, and I think a lot of it's just your own confidence as you age. And I think a lot of it for me was too selling the puppies. I was to the point where, I always had a waiting list, and I had the confidence that, like, you have to sell a puppy. In the beginning, you kind of have that pressure when you're just starting. You don't want to keep puppies for a year. You want to sell them. I mean, that's kind of the goal.
Mhm.
So you kinda maybe walk on eggshells a little bit with people where you normally wouldn't. But when we moved to Petersburg, that was kinda my turning point where after a couple episodes like that, we had another one with at the ranch, a family with 3 children. We're sitting in the dining room talking, and, the kids are running up and down the hall. We had a big long, kinda like this house, we had a big long hall, and our bedroom was at the very end of the hall. And the kids are running into our bedroom and jumping on our bed and just having a
Oh,
field day. And I'm
no.
like,
Oh, no.
and, like, no, they don't even think, it's not even like, "Kids, you shouldn't be doing that." There was none of that. The parents are just oblivious, like this is just normal. Like, who lets their kids go in any bedroom in somebody in a stranger's home? Like, who would,
Right.
I wouldn't even let my kids use the bathroom. It's like, it just blows my mind. And I'm like, for 30 minutes, I'm exaggerating. It was probably like 5 minutes. And I'm walking back there like, what, and I'm like, y'all need to get out and shut the door. And, as I'm going up the hall, I'm shutting the other bedroom doors. And it's like, why do I even have to do this? Like,
Right.
this is my home. Why, so, and it really, I think when I lived at the ranch, that's where I had several things. I had one incident where I had a younger, I don't wanna say, I guess a middle-aged woman. She was probably in her, I say 30s, probably late 30s, and she brought her parents with her, and she was buying a puppy and, of course, picking it out and everything. So she was in the kennels. I had, 10 by 10 chain link 4-foot high kennel set up in there with the puppies. And she was in there and the parents had stayed out, but she was in there and it was like every other step she took, she was stepping on a puppy. Like, puppies, I mean, you see my videos, they're right at your feet. Like boom, you go in there, they're chewing on your feet, they're chewing on your shoes, your pants, and all this stuff. And she just literally like 4 times stepped on the puppies, and she was like, after the 4th time, she was kinda giggling about it. She's like, "I can't take a step without stepping on the puppies." I'm like, "Well, maybe you ought to do something about that, sit down, don't hurt the puppies." She's literally stepping on the puppies and laughing about it. She just thought it was hilarious, and I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me." I mean, these things and that and stepping on puppies, I can't tell you how many times. I only had the one puppy ever dropped by that little boy, but adults stepping on the puppies is what gets me. Kids, you kind of get it because they just don't have that concentration, and it just happens, accidents happen with kids so quick. But when an adult does it, you think, okay, once I get it. Mistake, right?
But now we're gonna pay attention.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do it
Let's
again.
focus. Let's not continue to step on the puppies. But yeah, that's happened so many times. I mean, people just repeatedly step on the puppies, and I'm like, "Okay, it's time to get out. If you wanna see one, if you wanna sit down and hold it, I'll hand it to you," and that kinda thing. So, that's kinda where I started turning around and standing my ground with people, and I was to the point where you're not gonna walk all over me, and I'm not gonna let it happen because again, it's my responsibility to protect the puppies and the dogs. And at some point, it took me many years to have the courage to tell people, "Up, get out, whatever." But now I don't even give them that opportunity. The closest I get to that is, and I think this is only in the past 10 years, it's only happened twice. I think it was last year. Just it was kind of like now I had a lot of puppies. I had a lot of puppies. I had like 30 puppies. And, at I think it was 9 weeks, I had like 3 puppies left. So, if I have a few puppies left and you're coming to get one, I'll have them all out in the front in the pen so you can pick one at that point. But that's the only time I let people pick. And the pen I have isn't meant for people to get in. So, they can interact with them, but they don't go in there with them. So it's a little bit different. And that's, like I said, that's only happened twice. So, I just don't do anything like that. And so, yeah, it's just been just so crazy with people, I don't know. It just blows my mind. One of the other things, people who schedule with me, I can't tell you how many times, and this is why I'm so overly anal about scheduling a time with me. One of the last things I remember, and this has been a few years, I had a pickup scheduled for 9 a.m. Of course, I get the puppy all ready. And again, I'm sitting out front and it's like 9 a.m., 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock. I'm starting to make phone calls and sending texts like, hey, 11:30, you know, and it was almost 12, and somebody finally pulls in the driveway, and I'm thinking, "You gotta be kidding me, like, I've been sending you texts and calling, and nobody's answering their phone. No nothing, no nothing." I mean, not an email, nothing. And they get out of the car, and again, it's kind of the same thing, an older, probably 30, early 40s woman with her parents, and they're just strolling over, and I'm like, 3 hours of my day is shot, I have a million things to do, and they just start coming up the stairs and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry we're a little late. We stopped at Cracker Barrel and decided to have a breakfast, and we just got to chat and then lost all track of time." I'm like, "They've been sitting at Cracker Barrel for 2.5 hours and never even thought, oh, I had an appointment, maybe let's let them know I'm late." I can't tell you how many times, that was the worst one because it was 3 hours. They were 3 hours late, and I'm like, to me, 3 and, the funny thing is send me a text. I'm fine. I know if you're coming a 9-hour trip or whatever, you hit traffic, things change. We may have at 8 o'clock. You may not be able to get there till 1 o'clock. That's so fine.
Just let me know.
Yeah.
Don't leave me sitting here for 3 hours.
Right. I'll rearrange my whole day, but no, because I don't want to get in the middle of tearing the kennel apart and cleaning and then have to stop. It's like a whole big thing. Just let me know. Hey, there was an accident. We're sitting here for 2 hours on the side of the road. I'm not going to be, anything. If you're more than 30 minutes late or early, how about a heads up? And again, I'm so cool with it. And I tell people all the time, I make myself 100% available when people are traveling because we travel all the time and we know, yeah, it does. You may be going down the road and there's a big wreck. And next thing you've lost 2 hours. So, I just want to follow that up with, I get it if you're late, but when you just stop for a long breakfast and don't have the decency to just be like, heads up, running late, nothing, nothing. We had that. John, we can kind of talk about some of John's stuff. There was one time, he's loading up. He's got 8 puppies. He's doing one of those big loops. He was like going the southern route to Pennsylvania and then the northern route coming back. And he's got all these puppies. And like the second drop, he gets to the meeting spot and nobody's there. And it's like, wait, 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 nothing, nothing. Send a message, nothing, an hour's gone by. He's got a freaking 29-hour trip.
He's on a schedule.
Exactly. And he's sitting there waiting for almost 2.5 hours for these people, and no word, no communication. He can't get a hold of them. They're not answering their phone. They're not sending a text. And, he's got, and, these puppies, they need to get where they're going, and he's just sitting there at the gas station waiting. He's like, calling me. He's like, "What do I do?" I was like, "I don't know.
Get on the road.
Right,
Like,
right." And well, he ended up waiting, and then finally, after a certain amount of time, they finally sent a message, and of course, it was still going to be like almost an hour or something before they even got there. And, but he was like, he's not coming back that way. So, he ended up just sucking it up and sitting there and waiting. And it's like anymore, I just, when people want to do a delivery and they want to meet us, I just cringe because I'm like, and it's funny because I'll be sending them an email like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, please read the delivery rate. I'm going to explain this to you when John gets to his drop. 30 minutes. It starts the minute he pulls in that gas station or wherever you're meeting, clock starts. If you're not there in 30 minutes, that puppy's staying with him the whole trip and coming back. And that's the new policy. We haven't ever had to do it, but we will. The first time, I don't, that's why I tell people we don't like to do this when he has multiple drops and we've got to sit and wait for somebody. That throws everybody off. The other people we told times, we're not going to make it and everything. So yeah, we do not like to meet en route. Door to door is what we like to do because that's on our time. Boom, we're there. We don't have to wait out. Out of the car, hand in the puppy, back on the road. But yeah, that's another thing. People just, and again, it's. I get things are out of your control, but maybe some communication would be really nice. Just let us know what's going on. So, that's kind of why we've gotten so anal about some of the delivery stuff. It's when these things happen all the time, you got to come up with a solution, and they're usually not pleasant. It's like,
Yeah.
what do? You let people walk all over you all the time, or do you change it?
Set boundaries and stick
You
to 'em.
have to. I have so many boundaries. And anymore, it's kind of funny because people will, they'll call me and, it's a whole different thing when you pick up the phone and call me because I'm chatty Cathy, I'm blah, 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 going over all this stuff. And they realize I'm pleasant, I'm happy, I'm outgoing, I'm flexible, whatever you need kind of thing. But when you read it on my paper, it's like, if you're not here in 30 minutes, we're leaving, blah, blah, blah. It's really strict. And people are like, I wasn't really sure how to take you because, you read your information and there's, it seems like, they get in their mind that I'm gonna be like an army sergeant, you know? And then they show up and we're out there battling on the front porch for 3 hours, you know? I have to do that because people take such advantage of me. And, and it's often and it's still to this day. And how long have you been here? I mean,
9 months.
9 months? You've gotten a taste of it on you know? I mean, have at it. Give your little story. I mean, and that was what I don't know. You've done a few deliveries for me, but
Yeah.
yeah.
For the most part, they've all been very seamless and easy peasy. The one you gave me to handle things just between me and the client.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know why. You said I've done this before. I
Yeah.
want to do this again. Just very inconsiderate of time. I
Yeah.
sat and waited. We had a phone conversation. I sat and waited for a couple hours.
Did you?
I sent email. I sent, hello.
Yeah.
We have a time.
Appointment.
Um, and it wasn't until I let you know, hey, this phone call didn't happen. I'm not sure. I didn't get any response.
Yeah.
Then you emailed, and miraculously right away, then I get a phone call. Hey, I'm so sorry. Like just like that. Lost track of time.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just really set an alarm.
And that
You have an
same
appointment.
yeah, I just wanna add that same person did the same thing to me a couple times just in this one transaction. This was a second repeat puppy buyer. I went through the same thing because when I have a phone call, I put it on my schedule, 8 o'clock. I'm sitting at the computer with all my information in my phone waiting,
Yeah.
just like you.
Waiting.
Sunday morning,
Here we
waiting for
are.
that phone call.
Yeah.
Never happens.
Just waiting.
Yeah, because you don't wanna get doing something. That's how I am.
And then be interrupted. I
Yeah.
hate it. It drives me
Especially,
nuts.
when I do it with the dogs, you just can't always stop. You got the mom separated from the babies, you gotta put them back together, you clean, I can't just stop, and answer the phone. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, I just ended up being, I just let you know, and
Yeah.
then it just ended up not being anything. She's no longer a client.
No, she's not,
Right?
and that's kinda why, because, I mean, like, she was and you didn't even mention the whole, like, I have a process, and she knows my process, and she was expecting you to make all these
Oh,
arrange
yeah.
yeah,
Wanted me to pay for everything up
out of
front
your pocket.
and then reimburse after the fact. And it was like, wait, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah, and that's where I got in, and I was like, "Look, that's not a thing." And then she kinda tried to turn it all around like, "Oh, that's not what I meant." And I was like, because when I got the email, because I can be a hothead when people hit me wrong, and I always revert to my husband because he's the opposite. I'm like, "Read this email, John. Tell me what you think that means." Like, because 'cause I'm reading it as she wants Melanie to pay for everything and then show her receipts before she'll pay Melanie. And John's like, "No, that's exactly what I read." And you did the same thing with your
With my
husband, 'cause
husband.
we
Yeah.
it's
I said, wait,
ironically.
is this because
Yeah,
her wording was like, it was a little weird, but it was in
but,
everybody that read it was like, no, that says
yeah,
because it said with receipt
with receipts.
was
She
in
wanted
there.
the receipts before you would get your payment. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "That's not how this works. We're not gonna go because we fork out the money, and then you decide, 'Oh, I changed my mind.'" How many times has that happened, with people buying puppies? They
Hmm.
change their mind, and it's like, that's why I don't do anything. You pay up front for everything before we book anything, and that money's gotta clear. And she kept saying she's gonna mail a check. I'm like, "Have you read what I go through with the mail? It may be 3 weeks. I mean, I'm not gonna guarantee that price for 3 weeks because, airlines change every day, and the closer you get to that date, the more the airline ticket's gonna be." But that whole debacle was just a mess. I mean, and it was like and it had both of us all worked up. We
Yeah.
were both like, we needed to just go out that night and have a drink or something because we were so stressed out. It's like, what is like, where there, like, you're just dumbfounded. It's like, did she have no respect for our time and what we do? And it's like, and it wasn't just me. I'm used to, and I've told you, I said,
Yeah.
Melanie, this is my life.
I just don't know
This is
how
how
you.
people treat me all the time. It's like they just don't care, and I think now it's kind of funny because, so many people, again, they read my stuff and they think, they're gonna be talking to a drill sergeant, and I'm just I'm just not that way, but I have to come off that way because I've been so pushed around and about everything, not just scheduling, about money, about payments, and just you name it, And it's like, man, it's just
Right.
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Well, so we've talked a lot about kind of crappy
the crap
stuff.
side.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So tell me about some of the best
Some of the
experiences.
best. Well, and this is like, I can't give you like a moment. I mean, of course, some of the best experiences, and I'll just do this as a broad, and I'm probably going to start tearing up and crying. And I'm not a crier. I don't know why I do this because I'm so not a crier, but like you see people coming up and they'll get that first glimpse of their puppy. And it's like, I can feel it. My eyes are watering. And they have like that immediate connection and their heart is just healed when they just lost their dog or whatever. Everybody's got a story. But that first moment when they connect with their puppies and they're out there and they're bawling and I'm bawling and like everybody involved, that's one of the most, I mean, just
It's why you do it.
yeah,
Why you still do it,
yes,
even though.
it's just so profound when that happens, like the emotion and the love and like, people put so many bad labels on breeders and everything's money or you're just doing this for money. Duh. And it's like, no, it's those moments, it is so surreal to go and know the um, immense joy that these puppies bring to people. Seeing that moment and them walking up and just bawling and holding that puppy and shaking and just like, it's those moments and it's not just one, it's like hundreds of them. I mean,
Mhm.
time after time after time. And the husbands and the men, I've had so many just young guys come and it's the same thing. They've had a bad year. Their girlfriend left them this or, their parents
Whatever,
died,
yeah.
just anything. And they get this puppy and they're just out there blubbering over this puppy. And it's like, it's like that's probably one of the best, obviously the best things. And that's what spiraled this to be what it is because, I've gotten so big because as you see, my puppies are selling. I mean, people want these dogs and there's such connection with them, and I just keep growing and stuff. And so many people, that's probably one of the neatest things that I see over and over and over and over. It's so cool. I don't know. Well, you've
Mhm.
probably seen it with
Oh, dropping them off
yeah,
at the
yeah, at
airports,
the
yeah,
airport,
you can just see people's anticipation.
Yeah.
It is, and then they just burst. Their whole being and their energy
Yeah,
is
you
just
can
like
just
this
see it.
burst. They're so happy.
They are. And one of the last ones that John delivered on the airport, and I think I posted a picture on Facebook, I think, but the whole family was there and they made this big sign and they're there just waiting for John, and it's like, and it's such a positive impact, and in a world, we've talked about all the bad, in a world full of assholes and stupid people and bad things and, horrible things happening all around us, you have that moment of pure joy where, you've connected with the person and you're gonna be connected with that person probably for forever, the puppies only live a certain time, but you still usually they come back and, we start all over again and that kind of thing. There's so many people that, have gone through, 3, 4 different puppies, whatever the reasons, sometimes multiples, whatever, they keep coming back and every time it's that same reaction. So that's always one of my most positive things, just seeing the people, go through that. I mean, it's just you just can't explain it. It just makes your heart happy to see so much joy.
It's a beautiful moment.
It is. It really is. And I wish, and it's funny because, you look at people and I do this too, everybody goes off to work and it's like, hate my job and blah, you know, the stupid people I work with all the time. This is always happening. And I do the same thing. There's days I wake up and it's like, this is every day, every day. It's like, what is that show where it's just a loop of the guy's life? I forget.
Groundhog Day.
It's like that. It's like every morning I'm up 5 a.m. Dogs barking, poop everywhere, kennels are dirty, and it's like every day, every day. And I'm like, why do I do this some days? And then that happens. And it's like, okay,
Keeps you going for a few months.
this is where I'm supposed to be, you know, this
Yeah.
is what I'm supposed to do. And this is why, because, you know, that happened. And so yeah, it's pretty neat. You know, one of the things kind of unrelated, but one of the things I always like to talk about as far as positive things, um, my clients, they put so much thought in, and they should, don't get me wrong. So much thought and energy goes into what puppy they're going to get. Like, I've had so many people come and, "Oh, well, we're going to evaluate the litter and see which one fits us best." And it's like, okay. And then they come and they sit down, and the first puppy that comes to them is the puppy. I'm like, well, that's not an evaluation. Let's
Right.
get that clear. And that's always how I've all the years I've done this and all the times I've heard the word evaluation, I've never had not one client know what an evaluation is. They had no clue how to evaluate a litter of puppies. And I don't typically do it just because, you know, a caisson, you know, and I've told people this, you know, if I was raising German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dobermans, you know, a different dog, I would have a different process. But these little fluff balls, you know, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter which one you get, you know, and I kind of relate to it as children. You don't pick your children, you know, sometimes you get a good one and sometimes you get an obnoxious child, you know, and is that not true? And you can't pick your sex. You get what you get
Yeah.
and you deal with it, you know, and I kind of believe that with the dogs. I mean, and more to the point, at 5 weeks old, when we pick them, you can't tell me you're gonna evaluate those puppies and tell me which one's which. And let's be real, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same calm, easygoing, middle of the road, easy to train. Everybody wants that. So if you were gonna match your litter, you would match one puppy. And then what do you do with all the other ones? Seriously. You see so many breeders matching the puppies to the people. I would really like to know what they're doing. Like, what are they you so, you know, does somebody come to you and say, "I want the shy one?" I mean, I don't normally have people ask me that, you know, and there's always a shy one. Every litter, you have your outgoing, you have your shy, and you have everything in between. You know, you have your bossier ones, you have your submissive ones, you have this, you know, but everybody wants the one thing. So what do you do with that? You know? And that's why I've just kind of
Russian roulette, baby.
exactly.
You get what you
You
get,
get
and you
what you
don't come up
get.
fit.
But, you know, we laugh about that, but it's funny. Like I have yet, and I did this once a long time ago, and I probably should do it again. But I posted in my group, and because it was at a point where I had like 4 or 5 people just stressing about what puppy they're going to get. They were so freaked out about my process. They wanted to pick, they want to do this, they want to do that, and I'm like, nope, nope, nope. This is how we're doing it. And I posted in our private group. I'm like, I want to know what pick were you, how many puppies there were, what pick you were, and what you thought about your puppy. So if there's 8 puppies, and we're just going to say randomly, they're all females, and I've had this happen multiple times, all females, you have a first pick and you have a last pick and you have everything in between. So out of all those people, how did you feel about the puppy that you got?
Right.
And what does everybody say?
It was the perfect.
The perfect puppy.
She was perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect for us.
They're perfect.
Because they meld into your life.
Do.
They meld with your personality. They are a companion dog.
Yep.
And they are a companion dog not because we have a very specific personality, usually,
Yeah.
i.e. German Shepherd, those kinds of dogs, those are working dogs. They normally, you have the temperament and you have your one-offs of those.
Sure.
I have one of those.
Yeah.
But these dogs are meant to just melt and meld with your routine, your life, your personality. You know, if you are a couch potato, they're going to be a couch potato. if you like to be out and about and hike and do all the things,
Mhm.
they're going to go with you. Like,
Exactly.
they want to be with you.
Exactly.
They're going to do what you want to do.
Yep. And it's funny because I've had so many people like that situation where there's, maybe not 8, but if I've got 5 girls, of course, you have to pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when you get to 5, the people are sweating the whole time because they've already decided what puppy they want, but then they get to 5 and they get their puppy. It's the weirdest thing. I can tell you
Really?
over and over and over in a litter of more than 3 of whatever sex that everybody gets the puppy that they wanted. It's like, yeah,
Okay.
they'll be emailing back and forth. First pick will come and second pick will be, oh my gosh, thank gosh, I wanted orange. So then, third pick comes and they're like, oh my God, he's still available. I wanted blue, and then you go down the line and the last person's like, I cannot believe, but this is the pick that I wanted. This is the puppy out. And that happens.
I have goosebumps.
It's so crazy. It happens, I swear, like probably 8 out of 10 times. Everybody gets the puppy they pick or really close. They might have been between 2 or something and they got one of the ones that they were wanting because,
Hmm.
a lot of people have 2 in mind and stuff. But I have this one story. You want to talk about goosebumps? This was back in Maryland. I had this older couple come and I had a litter of puppies and it was a bigger litter. I'm going to say 8, pretty good split of what was male, female. And the husband wanted a female. He just kept saying, we're getting old. We can't lift him up. We want a smaller dog. We want the smallest dog. We want a female. We're going to go with a female. We're going to go with a female. So they came, and I think all the puppies, the males were all sold. And I think I had maybe 2 or 3 females for them to pick from. So we sat out back in the yard for, a couple hours and they were playing with the puppies and they finally decided on the puppy and of course a female. And, it was too early. It was like week 7. They had to come back and actually take the puppy home. So, they picked out the puppy. They're just happy. And, we just had a great old time. And in fact, they recently just bought another puppy from me not that long ago. They used to come to my parties, the Key Union that we used to have. We used to have the big weekend camp out parties and stuff. They came to all my parties. Just a crazy couple. We've had so many good laughs together. So they come back the next week. And like all the puppies had gone except for a few. I want to say there was 3. There was their puppy and then 2 other ones. Finally, in that week, one of the people that was getting one of the males backed out. So I don't even remember why, but they just canceled. They're not getting the puppy and this and that. So they come and they pick up and they come to pick up and we're out there with the puppies in the yard playing and just in conversation because I knew they wanted a female. They wanted, Art wanted a female. He wanted a female. He wanted a female. And I was joking with them because they were just really comical. They were cut
Hmm.
up kind of people. I was like, well, I'm just going to tell you, Art, if you want a male, I can get you a male. We had a cancellation and this little guy is available. And the puppy that was available was super, super dark, gorgeous puppy. Oh my God, his coloring was gorgeous. And the wife is just white as a ghost. Everything just fell off her face, turned white as a ghost. And she's just standing there. And I'm like, I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, that's the puppy I wanted. And she starts crying. And she's like, I never said anything, but that's the exact puppy I wanted. When I came, I had such a connection with that puppy. And, he's just standing there and he's like, "Oh, shit." Of course, he used a different word. And he's like, "I guess we're getting that one." And sure enough,
I'm crying.
right? Is that not beautiful? And I mean, I've had so many, of course, I have a hard time thinking of, but that one always stands out because I was like, this is crazy. Like, because I had had several things leading up to that with other people that, just similar to that, it's like, and I tell everybody anymore, it's y'all, you think you have something to do with all this, but you
No.
don't. The puppies know when they're born where they're going. And whatever it takes for them to get there, it's going to happen. Everything will fall into place and they go where they need to go. But yeah, that was one of the most, I mean, I can't, it was just so crazy, just the look on her face and the fact that she never said anything to anybody and the fact that they were so set on a female. And then they got this guy and they named the dog Sammy. And it ended up he was I know we've talked about this before, but he was one of the moose puppies, so they wanted a female for a small little dog, and they
Mhm.
ended up with, like, a 80-pound
Oh my
Keeshond.
gosh.
He got huge. He was
Wow.
huge. He was under 80, probably 75, 76 pounds or something,
Still,
but it was crazy, and
I would
it was
not
like
wanna be hauling him up on a table.
exactly. But yeah, that's probably one of my best stories as far as, people getting the puppy that they need to have. And that's why I always tell people don't overthink this process because it's not it's all gonna be okay.
Mhm.
Stop with all that stress. Just let it happen. If you're the last pick, the puppy you're gonna get is gonna be amazing.
They're all amazing.
They really
They all
are,
are.
and again, it's like, you kinda get what you get, but I really don't think the only time I think it really matters and the only time is if you get a really strong-willed puppy and you have, again, the owners that don't discipline, kinda like the parents of that little boy, they're just not gonna tell that little boy no, and I can imagine what he's like today. But yeah, that's the only time I ever see a problem is sometimes I do see people that end up with one of the stronger puppies and it's just an epic fail because they don't provide boundaries. It's kind of like me with my people. I have boundaries,
Mhm.
because I have to protect myself, it's like so many things happen over the years, good, bad, ugly, you name it. I mean, just kind of have to do that. But yeah, as far as the picking process, I think people, and it's one of those things. There's so much freaking information out there. You don't know who to believe. Or I had a client the other day. She was just freaking out over making all these notes and trying to prepare this plan and doing all this stuff. And trying to decide what obedience to do first and everything. And I'm like, whoa, let's just chill out, take a deep breath. Let's focus on week 1. Here's your goal. House training, no biting. That's it.
Great,
Great.
which
Yeah.
shouldn't be too
Which
hard with
yeah,
these puppies
yeah,
anyway, because 'cause
they're kinda
they
used
have
to it,
some
yeah.
experience.
But, and she's all, trying to figure out how to, have this dog perfectly trained in a week. I'm like, you need to just kinda sit back and chill out and stop stressing over all this stuff, Take it one step at a time and it'll happen.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Right, right. It's just so funny, but yeah, that's kind of my, that I think hopefully has people understanding a little bit more why I shut my doors. It's just one of those things that I really didn't want to do it. And, it kind of goes against everything that I am as a person because I am very outgoing, social, friendly. I like to have people in, some cup of coffee, whatever, visit. But, the world we have today, it's just not something I'm gonna risk anymore, and if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but those are some of my reasons why. I think they're good reasons. I mean, I think if the roles were reversed and I was going into y'all's house and doing some of the things that people have done in my house,
Right?
I think you'd get it. No? And again, I say this all the time. I kinda give what I get, Most people I deal with are just amazing. I have such beautiful relationships with people. I have people that just, get on the phone and literally 2 hours, we'll just be catching up, what's been going on with your kids and all this stuff, and, it's been really cool as far as that goes, the relationships and everything, but, there's been a lot of bad, so, I kinda had to touch on that, kinda like I feel bad because, like, I feel like I'm always negative, but it's kind of been like my life. I mean, is that, you kinda, when people wanna know about me and my experiences, you gotta throw that in there and you have to explain those things to make everything else more clear, It's like
Well, we don't grow when things are good. We
yeah.
grow when you go through things.
That's a good
So,
point. That's where you build your character and you learn how to cope and adjust. And, like I said, I've never never had to pull a gun on somebody, I've never been in that situation, and to be in that situation and think, in those moments when, like, I'm pretty calm with things like that. Again, I'm, firearms are just, I have a passion for shoot. I love target shooting, skeet shooting. We would just skeet shoot on Easter every year. That was our thing. I enjoyed target practice and all that stuff, and of course hunting. So, I consider myself exceptional with firearms. I'm a dead shot. So that aspect of it didn't bother me having to protect myself because I knew I would be fine. I knew I would be fine. But moving past that, just having to go through those motions. And then I thought, one of my biggest things, and I didn't really touch on this when we were talking about it, the whole, I call it PTSD because I don't know what else you call it. You go through something traumatic like that. My thought goes to his children. He had kids. Like, what if I had to do that? Like, how do people get beyond that? And this was a horrific, just crazy situation. Most of the time people are never going to have to deal with something like that. But if I had to deal with something like that, how do you get past that? Oh, how would you get past that? Like, I don't know.
Certified professional.
Yeah, probably. There'd probably be some of that. But yeah, it's like, to be pushed to those levels is kind of concerning. And, that level was extreme, but there's been so many. It's like, oh my God, like, how do I deal with this?
Hmm.
And that's what happens when you bring it, that's why Facebook Marketplace, nobody meets at their home because all these weird things are happening. And I'm getting to the point where, do I keep meeting at the home? I don't know. Do I, of course, at this point, my address is everywhere. It's not like people aren't going to know where I live and where my puppies are. But, again, now everything's under surveillance.
Yeah.
I know you're coming before you're here. Between the dogs and everything else, my phone beeps every time a camera moves, you know, and I'm glued to it all the time. I'm like, "Ooh, what's that?" Even when I'm, at the doctor's office or something, I'm like, "What's
Hmm.
going on?" That kind of things. So yeah, it's just a different world, and I hope, that kind of all ties into, why I've stopped bringing people in kennel tours. And if you show up and I have a sidearm, don't freak out. Something weird's happened, and I feel like that's something I have to do. I mean, I'm just always going to do what I have to do to protect the puppies and protect myself. On those days that I'm here alone, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I haven't so far, but you never know. So things always change with Erbekees. We changing contracts, changing this and changing that. But
Changing room.
yeah, no, I'm not hoping not for a long time. Not for long, at least not till I'm done. I know, yeah, groomers, non-groomers, Facebook watchers. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. There was a couple good stories in there. I think it's kind of entertaining. I love the one about that little puppy, little Sam. That was just too cool. So yeah, don't stress out about what puppy you get because it's going to be the perfect puppy. I mean, geez, just look at it. Is there a
Right.
bad one in the bunch? I mean, for real. And then some people get so stuck on the coloring. It's like,
They're not going to look the
they're
same in
not,
2 weeks.
I know, it's like it's gonna be a totally different puppy by the time they're an adult, so don't even think about that? But yeah, so I don't know, what else do we have to add?
I think that's it.
I think, I don't know, story time with Erbekees. There's a couple stories for you, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, some of everything. But yeah, I just wanted to touch, as y'all notice, we're still doing the yard picture, and we are not on camera. I kind of wanted to touch on this one more time because we haven't really touched on it. So in this process, I think a lot of y'all who know me know I'm not a techie person. So I am still trying to figure out editing. And one of the things that dawned on me, if we did like our faces and I had to edit words or take things out or move things around, then our mouths wouldn't be lining up. And I don't have a clue on how to do any of that stuff. So yeah, I think I don't know, maybe forever, we'll see, or until I can like afford to hire somebody to do our editing.
Right.
I think we're going to just leave it at enjoying the views of the doggies out there. And, that way we can keep with our hand signals and our notes. Yeah, because I think I want to touch on that real quick before we go. And this is story time, so I'm gonna go tell the story. So when we first started this, me and Melanie, we obviously have never done anything like this, either one of us. And when I edited the first podcast, the introduction, I remember texting her and I was like, I am so sorry. Like I talk over you so many times. I'm like, I feel so bad. Like I'm always cutting you off. And of course, in the moment, I don't realize it. And then after a couple more, I was like, ha, you do it too. You're cutting me off. And so we thought, we joked. I was like, well, you need to come up with a signal when you want to cut in and say something. Let's do hand signals because we can do that because y'all aren't seeing. So she came up with putting her finger on her nose. And she was like, if I put my finger on my nose, that means shut up.
I have something to say.
Yes. Yes.
You know what's funny is we do this at home. Like if someone else is talking and you have something to say, but you don't want to forget,
Uh-huh.
it helps.
Okay.
It helps you not forget that. And so
Yeah.
that's where that comes from.
Well, it makes sense. And so the next podcast, Melanie's over there pointing to her nose, pointing to her like 4 or 5 times, pointing to her nose, and I'm just babbling. I'm just babbling. Not even like I'm thinking maybe she has an ick. I don't even know what I was thinking.
So finally I just flipped her off and she shut up for a second.
And not just one middle finger, both of them. So that is our hand signal now to shut up. I get both fingers. And she just sits there with a big grin on my face, and I just kind of shut up. And yeah, that's pretty clear. I got it. The nose, yeah, don't got it. Fingers, got it. Shut up. So yeah. So just for the record, we know we talk over each other. We just,
We're working on it.
we're working on it. There's so many things we're working on, but anyway, that's pretty funny, I thought. But yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap that up. Story time with Erbekees. It's been fun. End of the day, I love y'all. I have the best clients out there. I'm just like so totally blessed to be a part of this. We sit here talk about, all the emotions that go into this. But yes, I'm just so blessed to be a part of all of this. I mean, all of y'all. And I'm not I call it's funny because like my family call me the puppy Nazi, kind of like the soup Nazi from, yeah. Because yeah, I do that. I'll tell you real quick, no puppy. But yeah, in general, I'm so not that way. I'm pretty down to earth and social and everything. But yeah, so again, over the years, I just thank all my clients for, taking their time and trusted in me and establishing these relationships I have with all of y'all because it's changed my life really. It's surreal the amount of friendships I've got through my dogs. So yeah, I just want to thank everybody today for your continued support. If you haven't already, please help me with my YouTube channel. Please hit those like, follow, subscribe buttons. Comment, all that stuff. I'm gonna plug it, I need followers, I need subscribers to keep this going. But yeah, again, hit those like buttons, follow me. Thank you again for all your time and support. Thank you, Melanie, for holding my hand. I think this has been fun. I don't know. We're having fun.
We're having fun. That's all that matters.
I guess, if anything, there's that. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.